Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're zooming way in, turning our focus to something incredibly vast yet entirely unseen. We're going to explore the fascinating microscopic world that essentially runs the biological systems of our planet. It's an engine that operates silently, constantly, and honestly, without it, life as we know it would just grind to a screeching halt. Take a look around you. You might see buildings, forests, oceans, or maybe just the room you're sitting in right now. We humans tend to think of large, visible organisms, like trees, animals, and ourselves, as the main drivers of the environment. But the core machinery actually running our planet, it's completely invisible to the naked eye. Today, we're about to explore that ultimate invisible engine, the world of true bacteria.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by meeting the true bacteria. Then look at the microscopic powerhouses, dive into decomposers, helpers, and pathogens, explore exactly how bacteria survive, and finally, meet the tiny rule breakers.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Meet the True Bacteria, the blueprint of eubacteria.
So when scientists talk about eubacteria or true bacteria, we aren't just talking about a handful of species. There are literally thousands of different eubacteria out there. But despite this massive variety, they all share a defining blueprint, a rigid cell wall. Think of it as microscopic armor that gives them structural integrity in a really harsh environment. Plus, if they're the motile type, meaning they can move around on their own, they possess a flagellum, which is basically a tiny whip-like tail that lets them cruise through their surroundings.
Moving right along to Section 2, the microscopic powerhouses, creating energy and recycling matter.
Now this is where it gets super cool. We've got two incredibly different ways these guys get their energy. On one side, we have solar-powered cyanobacteria. These are photosynthetic autotrophs, meaning they actually use chlorophyll A, just like green plants, to harness light and feed themselves. But in stark contrast, you've got chemosynthetic autotrophic bacteria. These guys don't need sunlight at all. They act like miniature chemical refineries, oxidizing inorganic substances like nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia. They literally use the energy released from those chemical reactions to produce their ATP, which is their cellular energy. Let's zoom in a bit on those solar-powered cyanobacteria. You might actually know them by their everyday name, blue-green algae. Their versatility is just staggering. They can live as unicellular loners, they can group up to form colonies, or they can even grow into long filamentous chains. Because they're so adaptable, you'll find them absolutely everywhere, in freshwater lakes, out in marine ocean environments, and even right on terrestrial land. When they do decide to live in colonies, they protect themselves with this gelatinous sheath. And honestly, you've probably seen their work without even realizing it. They are the exact organisms that often form those massive, thick blooms you see floating in polluted water. But here is the absolute kicker. Some of these cyanobacteria, specifically organisms like nostoc and anabina, possess what is literally a microscopic superpower. They can fix atmospheric nitrogen. Now, nitrogen gas is super abundant in the air, but it's completely useless to most living things in that form. Well, these specific cyanobacteria can pull that unusable gas right out of the air and convert it into a usable form. They do this heavy lifting inside highly specialized cells known as heterocysts. They're basically creating biological fertilizer out of thin air. It's wild.
Meanwhile, let's circle back to those chemosynthetic bacteria. While they are busy oxidizing chemicals just to make their own energy, they are simultaneously acting as the planet's microscopic recycling plants. They play a massive, indispensable role in processing and recycling the essential nutrients that entire ecosystems rely on. We're talking about critical elements here: nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and sulfur. Without these unseen workers constantly churning and recycling these materials, the nutrient cycle of our entire planet would face a catastrophic bottleneck.
Okay, on to Section 3, decomposers, helpers, and pathogens. The multitasking heterotrophic bacteria. Unlike the autotrophs we just talked about, heterotrophic bacteria cannot make their own food. They have to consume other organic material to survive. But before we get into how they directly impact human life, we have to recognize their absolute most vital role on Earth. The vast majority of these highly abundant organisms are important decomposers. They break down dead and decaying organic matter. Essentially, they are the unseen cleanup crew making sure our world can renew itself, rather than just piling up with endless waste. But when it comes to us humans, it's a total Jekyll and Hyde situation. It's an intense duality. As helpers, they are our greatest allies. We literally rely on them for making curd from milk, producing life-saving antibiotics, and fixing nitrogen directly into legume roots for agriculture. But as hazards, they are formidable foes. We're talking about dangerous pathogens responsible for devastating diseases like cholera, typhoid, tetanus, and even citrus canker, which destroys crops. It truly is a stunning double life.
Section 4. How bacteria survive. Reproduction and adaptation.
So how do they maintain their sheer overwhelming numbers? Well, they rely on 3 distinct biological strategies, going from simple to a bit more complex. First up, fission. This is their main method. They essentially just copy their contents and split right into 2 identical cells. It's incredibly fast. Second, when the environment gets tough, say it's too hot or too dry, they trigger a survival mechanism and produce highly resilient spores to just ride out the danger. And finally, they have an adaptive edge. They use a primitive type of DNA transfer, a sort of sexual reproduction, where they pass genetic material directly from one bacterium to another. This lets them share traits and adapt to brand new challenges over time.
And finally, Section 5. The tiny rule breakers. Meet the mycoplasma. This brings us to a massive biological exception. Remember that rigid cell wall we said was the defining blueprint of eubacteria? Well, the mycoplasma completely lack one. They take that foundational rulebook and just throw it right out the window.
Because they are missing that bulky wall, they actually hold a pretty crazy record. They're the smallest living cells currently known to science. But you absolutely should not underestimate them just because they're tiny. They are remarkably tough. They can survive completely without oxygen. And, circling back to our talk about hazards, many of these tiny, wall-less mycoplasmas are highly pathogenic, meaning they're fully capable of causing diseases in both animals and plants. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. We've seen how they build themselves, how they pull energy out of thin air and raw chemicals, how they act as the ultimate cleanup crew, build our medicines, and sometimes cause our diseases. Knowing these invisible engines, these true microbacteria, are the fundamental forces that sustain and shape the intricate balance of our world, I want to leave you with a provocative question. Who really inherited the Earth? We walk around every day thinking we're in charge, but it's this microscopic realm that's running the true machinery of the planet. I really hope this explainer gave you a totally new appreciation for the unseen world all around us. Thank you so much for watching, and keep exploring.